Go ahead, Tim.
Well, good morning. I'm Tim Sheehy, president of the Metropolitan Milwaukee Association of Commerce. Our mission is to develop this region as a globally competitive location for businesses that foster high-value employment to sustain a vibrant quality of life for all. Today's program is sponsored by United Healthcare. In times like these, a traditional health plan may not be the best fit for your business. So take a closer look at the All Savers alternate funding from United Healthcare. MMAC has partnered with United Healthcare to offer coverage for groups from 5 to 99 employees. Now small businesses can take advantages of benefits typically reserved for larger companies, including underwriting for more competitive pricing, better data so your business understands where your premium dollars are going, a potential surplus refund if claims are lower than expected. So contact your MMAC broker or visit uhc.com/MMAC to learn more. In addition, we'd like to thank Spaces, which is serving as MMAC's temporary home during our office relocation. With over 3,000 global locations and 10 in Wisconsin, Spaces makes it easy to have a productive day at work. So this may be the only program you get today that doesn't focus on the election. So enjoy it while you can. But the programs that we run focused on dealing with COVID and business strategies during this pandemic unpack the challenges and explore the opportunities facing the region as we recover from the pandemic. Our goal is to provide actionable insights to bettering the region as a place to live, work, play, and learn. What changes can we expect to stick with us? What innovations will become the new normal? And how do we best compete for capital investment and jobs? The last program we had addressed the impact and trends facing post-secondary education in the region. Today's program focuses on how work gets done. How can we work best in this environment of social distancing? What changes are here to stay? How are employers adjusting? How are employees adapting? We have a great panel to share some thoughts and answer your questions. Michelle Nettles, the Chief People and Culture Officer for Manpower Group, Tori Termott, Head of Human Resources for Harley-Davidson, and Stacy Peterson, Chief Executive Officer of Conoils. And we'll get to our panel in just a bit. But first, let's start with an update from Dr. Ben Weston, Department of Emergency Medicine and Associate Professor for the Medical College of Wisconsin, who is more than capable of filling in for Dr. Raymond, who had a previous commitment. So Dr. Weston, again, thank you for joining us and no shortage of information when it comes to the pandemic and what's happening in Wisconsin. So I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Tim, and thank you for having me today. I'm happy to be here. I will share a screen here. All right, so Dr. Raymond's shoes are quite large to fill. So I'm going to show the slides that he shows. I'm going to go through them relatively quickly. And rather than trying to do exactly what he does, I'm going to do something a little different afterwards, show a few different trends that we're seeing in a few different ways to kind of augment the slides that he typically shows. So just going through the slides.
Dr. Weston, before you start, I meant to do this, just remind folks, sure, if you've got questions, go ahead, put them in the Q&A. And we'll get them to the panel or to Dr. Weston.
Perfect. So I'll show these, and certainly this is, I believe, recorded and online, so feel free to pause and pore over them, but I'm going to go through them relatively quickly and just point out a few really key elements on here. So the percent new cases, and there's different ways of calculating percent positives, but I think the take-home points right here are that Milwaukee and Wisconsin are seeing fairly similar percent positives right now. You can see that right here. And then both of them are certainly trending unfavorably at this point. When we go to the next slide here, basically, it's a bad situation that we're seeing in Wisconsin right now. We're seeing increased number of overall patients. We're seeing rapidly increasing inpatient volumes. And also increasing ICU patient volumes. We'll see some figures coming up on that. And then our availability of ICU beds are decreasing. Ventilators are decreasing, but it's okay. And then PPE has remained fairly stable. Now, granted, we're using contingency level PPE. So whereas, 6 months ago, we might wear a mask and throw it in the garbage when we're done with a patient. Now we're wearing that same mask throughout the entire day. But nonetheless, by doing that, our PPE needs have remained stable at this point. When we look at some trends here, we can see our recovered numbers are close to 80%. It's important to remember with those recovered numbers, the way that's defined in many, many cases is that 30 days have passed since they were diagnosed, as opposed to following up with the individual and saying, are your symptoms gone? We know there's a lot of folks that have lingering symptoms, especially, or in particular, young folks are having lingering headaches, body aches, loss of smell and taste, fatigue in particular is one that has been lingering for weeks or even months in a lot of people, often called long haulers. We see worsening doubling times, worsening 7-day growth rates as well. And then here are a few of the data sources. Now I'm going to go through a few sites that I think are pretty informative. So this is the New York Times, and they show where the outbreak is worst currently. And we can see that 8 out of the 20 here are in Wisconsin. So Beaver Dam, Fond du Lac, Wausau Weston, Sheboygan is particularly bad, Eau Claire, Wisconsin, Manitowoc, Green Bay, and Appleton. So 8 of the top 20 areas are unfortunately in Wisconsin. And then when we look at what is bad news ahead, so these are changes week to week of areas. 4 of the areas that are predicted to get particularly bad: Racine, Fond du Lac, Baraboo, and then La Crosse. 4 of those 20 areas are in Wisconsin, where we think that things are going to continue to get even worse than they currently are. So focusing in on Wisconsin and how it relates to other states, this is a COVID Act Now. I think it's a nice site to look at and understand the trends that we're seeing looking state to state. And Wisconsin for quite a while now has been ranking number 3 in a bad way, the 3rd worst state as far as new daily cases per 100,000. So adjusted for population, we are behind North and South Dakota. They've been hit really hard, but Wisconsin has been there in number 3 for several weeks now at this point. When we look at summary statistics for Wisconsin, I think this is one of the most important ones. Again, there's 2 different ways of calculating percent positivity. We can get into that if people are interested, but the trends are really what matters. And we can see those positivity trends are just continuing to increase over time. We don't seem to see any flattening going on with our percent positivity. When we switch over here and look at the Wisconsin Hospital Association, I think the most informative part here is this, just our rising hospitalization numbers. And actually over the last day, we've had more of an increase in day over day hospitalizations from yesterday to today than we've had at any other point since the beginning of April. So today is an unfortunate day in the pandemic. Over 100 new hospitalizations of COVID patients just from yesterday to today. So really a very concerning trend going on there. Focusing in a little more on Milwaukee County, there's a few areas to emphasize here. So one is that when we look at just the raw number of cases over here, we can see that the trend is increasing. It doesn't appear to be slowing, and it's just far higher than we've seen in the past. And one of the things that's important about the raw numbers here is how it taxes our public health officers and our public health departments. It taxes them with tracing. It taxes them with just data management and keeping up with all these folks. So that has been one of the real challenges going on there. When we look at deaths, we're also starting to see a definitive upward trend in our community in Milwaukee County with deaths as well. We've seen this in the state for some time. Milwaukee County for a while was doing better than the rest of the state. We certainly seem to have caught up as far as cases, as far as deaths, as far as percent positivity as well. When we focus in on the map here, there seems to be this cluster that goes from the east side down near Marquette, wraps around through the south side of the city, and then kind of into West Milwaukee. And that is the most concentrated area of cases right now in the county. But it's important to remember, especially down in the southern part of the county, the census tracts are just more spread out. And so you can see we have large circles down here. And really throughout the county, there's cases. Much like throughout the state, there's cases. There's really no areas that we're seeing that are being spared from disease burden right now. When we flip over to our testing data, there is one bright spot here, which is that our turnaround times for tests have actually been really good. So our local labs Exact Sciences that the state contracts with. They've all been turning around tests within 48 hours most of the time. So that's one good sign. There's not too many good signs to point out, but that is one. Our testing numbers continue to go up, and at the same time, our percent positivity over here continues to go up. These two numbers together are very concerning. That not only are, usually as you see more and more people getting tested, it drives down your percent positives because you're bringing in more people as opposed to just the really sick people. But we're seeing the opposite here. We're seeing more and more people getting tested, but we're seeing our percent positive continue to climb up, which is a really worrisome sign for our community, and a similar sign that we're seeing for the rest of the state. When we look at our hospital capacity numbers just locally, we're seeing a concerning uptick here. And when we see our new number here for today, it's going to be pretty close to 400. Unfortunately, in Milwaukee County, we're also seeing the largest uptick that we've seen since the beginning of the pandemic, day over day, coming today. So an unfortunate day for hospitalizations throughout the state today. Milwaukee County started planning early on. We planned for ICU beds. We have a large range of ICU beds. We do have the ability to flex floor beds. And then, of course, we also have our alternate care facility, which I believe now has 13 patients there at this very moment. More than that have been there overall, but continues to bring in more and more patients each day from hospitals that are getting just really strained. Two more slides to show here, or areas to show. One is our key indicators. Different from the last time I participated in this webinar, which was maybe a month and a half ago. We have a lot more red indicators. So our cases, this shows a poor trend in our cases and our percent positivity. Our testing numbers, just because of our high percent positivity, and our tracing, because as I mentioned, our local health officers are just really getting strained keeping up with tracing. They're able to keep up with less than 50% of cases right now with the staffing they have, even with increased staffing that they have done as of recently. And then lastly, just to finish off here, this is the SAFER model. So as a reminder of what the SAFER model is, so if you look in the upper right here, it takes into account testing rate as well as positivity rate and puts those two together to create 4 boxes in 4 different colors. So blue, which we're not seeing much of on the map anymore, is undetermined. So low testing, low positivity, not real sure what's going on in the community. Green, if you have to choose a place to live, this is it. There's a lot of testing going on, but you're not finding many cases. That's green. Red, there's a lot of testing and a lot of cases. It's a bad situation. We know there's a lot of disease going on. And then yellow is an interesting category. So there's a lot of positivity, but there's not much testing. So not many people are getting tested, but when they do get tested, you're seeing a whole lot of positives. What yellow suggests is there's just not enough testing going on in that community, not enough individuals seeking out testing in that community. And when we look here on the left is our previous output, that's last week. And here's this week's output. And so comparing apples to apples here, we're just seeing a lot more red throughout the community, higher rates of testing, continued high positivity. I think there's 2 communities that are really concerning that we're seeing right now, and those are our yellow communities. So down here, the south side of the city of Milwaukee, our predominantly Hispanic community, and the central and north part of the city of Milwaukee right here, are predominantly African-American community. Those 2 communities, for whatever reason, and this hasn't been the case several weeks ago, but now it is, have lower levels of testing, but continued high positivity. So those are 2 communities that we're really focusing on, getting the message out about testing, getting availability out about testing, and resources to make sure that people are able to get tested when they need to. So I'll stop there. I'm happy to take any questions now or later in the webinar. Thank you. And I think you're muted right now, Tim. Tim, I think you're muted at the moment. Sorry.
You'd think after months of this, I'd get it right, but thank you. Good to have a doctor in the house. So one of the questions I have as you look at the map and you start to look at the different communities around Wisconsin is, how do you forecast upcoming cases in particular areas of the state, or can you?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it is hard to forecast areas, but one thing that does help us to forecast, and I'll pull this back up again, is this SAFER model. So that's one of the intents here. The areas that we're seeing yellow in are areas of concerning disease activity. They're not proven high levels of disease activity yet because there's not enough testing. But if a community has turned yellow, it really suggests that there's kind of a simmering issue going on there. There's more and more cases rising. The other thing that we look at, so one of the things about our dashboard here is you can dig into it as much as you want and put down all sorts of different layers. So not to get too wonky on you here, but we have a change in percent positive over 14 days. And so this shows you areas that are changing, and the areas that have a lot of change in percent positive seem to be on a concerning trajectory of increasing cases. So these are a few of the different things that we use to try to predict kind of what's coming next. We also look at testing patterns. If communities are starting to ramp up in how much testing they're seeking out, it suggests that there may be increasing disease burden in those communities.
Another question, and you touched on it a little bit in terms of the percentage of tests that are given, and then how many of those turn into hospitalizations or the rate. So is there can you just take us through the progression? What's happening in terms of the positive cases? How many are hospitalized? And then when you get in the hospital, how many go into an ICU?
Yeah, so since the beginning, when we average it out, we've probably been seeing about a 10% or maybe slightly under 10% hospitalization rate overall for positive cases. We have seen a little bit of a difference in how many folks get ICU care. So when we look at our Wisconsin Hospital Association graph right here, and let me pull up oops, it's refreshing here. So what we're seeing is, let me get the drawer here if it'll work. Yeah, so back here, when you look at ICU beds, which is the light blue compared to the dark blue, it was, maybe say 30% of beds, 20% of beds were ICU beds. When we look now, we're seeing a lower level of ICU beds. So less people seem to be getting severely sick or necessarily requiring ICU care. Now, there's a number of reasons for that. It doesn't seem to be that anything has changed with the virus. It doesn't seem to be that the virus is less virulent than it used to be or anything of that sort. It probably is testing. People are getting tested earlier. They're aware that they have COVID. They're able to take precautionary measures, seek medical care earlier before they get really sick. Number two is that our medical care has just changed. So when somebody came into my emergency room 7-8 months ago, if they were really sick, we would intubate them. We might give them hydroxychloroquine, we might give them azithromycin. We don't do most of those things anymore. We try really hard not to intubate patients, which is putting a tube down, putting them on a ventilator. We try not to do that because we know patients don't do as well. Sometimes you have to, but we know if you don't have to, patients don't do as well. They do better on really high flow oxygen through their nose. We know hydroxychloroquine doesn't work, and so we use other meds, some as simple as steroids, some things like remdesivir that we know seems to work better, seems to have some promising effects on decreasing hospitalization times, in some cases actually helping people to survive severe disease. So the medical treatment certainly has changed. And because of that medical treatment changing, not as many people need to go to ICUs. A ventilator is one of the key reasons, a medical reason is one of the key reasons, or a ventilator is one of the key reasons you need to go to an ICU. But if you're on high flow oxygen, sometimes you can go to a floor bed instead of an ICU bed. So it helps to save our ICU capacities as well.
Yeah, Dr. Weston, for as long as we've been talking about this, we talk about flattening the curve. And obviously, as you point out, the big reason is so we don't stress the hospitals and their healthcare workers. If you look out ahead, just looking at the trends you have, one of the questions is, do you see us running into a point where we're going to overstep our capacity and our ICU capability?
Yeah, so I think it's a really important point that you made, that the purpose, the entire purpose really of flattening the curve, it really is about hospitalizations. If you don't flatten the curve and you have all the cases at once, you may have just as many people getting cases, you may have just as many people getting sick, but you don't stretch it out over a period. And so you don't allow your hospitals to care for those people. The problem that we're seeing now is when I showed you those Wisconsin Hospital Association trends, when I showed you the Milwaukee County hospitalization trends, it's a straight line. It's not a curve. And so unfortunately, we're not starting to see that end. It'd be really nice if we start to see those level off. Honestly, every day I'm looking at these and hoping that we start to see a little bit of leveling so that we can start to anticipate when this is going to slow down, but there's no slowing down in sight. And even though we're okay for hospital capacity in Milwaukee County, we're tight, but we're okay. We're better than certain other parts of the state where they have smaller hospitals, smaller hospital systems. It can only keep up for so long. And if that line continues on that trajectory, no hospital system can keep up.
Yeah, so I'm going to give you kind of a last question, then we'll pivot, and I hope you can stay with us because we've got other questions to answer. But and kind of the obvious answer here, at least in my book, is we don't have a control group. So there's no normal control group. So the question is really, people are asking, when we see a rise in trend and and people seem to be wearing masks, is there a correlation between what we're seeing? Are masks really making a difference? And I think that gets a heart of a lot of the conversations that we hear. Well, geez, people are wearing masks. It's still going up. Do they really make a difference?
Yeah, so I think it's an important question to address. So on one sense, no, we don't have a control group necessarily out in the environment. We're not having, put these 1,000 people in masks, put these 1,000 people not in masks, randomize them and see who gets sick. It'd be a nice study. It'd be terribly unethical and would harm a lot of people. But what we do have are control groups when we look at smaller scientific studies. How much did the viral particles get through masks? We also have control groups when we look at who gets sick, and we see that folks that overall, now there's a lot of confounding factors, but overall, the people that get sick tend to be people who are less vigilant about mask wearing, less vigilant about physical distancing. But I think one of the important points that comes with mask wearing is that it's one layer of protection. So if you wear a mask at your indoor gathering of 20 people, it's not going to be terribly effective. But if you wear a mask and you physically distance and you gather in open air and you do it for a short period of time, then you're going to maximize your protection and really decrease your transmission of disease. But if you pick and choose just one of those four things, you wear a mask indoors, you don't wear a mask outdoors in groups of people, things like that, it's not going to be terribly effective.
Thank you very much, Dr. Weston. Appreciate you being with us, and we'll come back towards the end of the program with more questions.
Thank you.
So let's kind of jump into our discussion here, the second part of the program, if you were, to really talk about how work gets done in this environment of COVID, which sounds like it's going to be with us for some period of time. And again, as I mentioned up front, we've got Michelle Nettles, the Chief People and Culture Officer with Manpower Group, Tori Termont, the Head of Human Resources at Harley-Davidson, and Stacy Peterson, the Chief Executive at Conoils. So thank you all for joining us. And Michelle, I'll start with you. You're going to kind of, I think, lay the groundwork for us. You've got a couple slides. But as I think about this, Milwaukee's really blessed to have a global thought leader like Manpower here in our backyard as you look at what's happening across the globe, really, and through all your customers. So we're grateful you could take some time here to share your thoughts and research on trends during the pandemic. So it'd be helpful if you took us through a little bit what this means, both short-term and long-term, as it relates to how work gets done.
Great, Tim, and I'm really happy to be a part of this. And I'm waiting for, I presume Chris is going to get the slides on the screen. But as Tim said, Manpower Group, we've done a bit of research and study, and the important thing about this is we did some study in November and we released that data in February. And since COVID, we've done an additional review. And what we see and what we know is that workers' behaviors are only accelerating with COVID. So a lot of people often talk about, is COVID creating change? What we know is it's actually accelerating against a few choice areas. And you know that by, workers working from home more. And we saw overnight how organizations and how companies were able to move from their office to home. And we've seen that trend continue to accelerate. With that, we know consumers and workers also are less interested in a commuting, and commute offer for them a bit of flexibility. By reducing that time for commute, they have more time to teach their kids at home if they're learning from home, but they also have time to do more personal health, wellness, and well-being. So we see that trend. But what we know is happening also is this divide that's emerging between men and women. And it may be more attributable to historic roles that women have played in the household versus men. And with kids at home, there's more teaching, more obligation that's showing up with women. And so women are also responding differently to the survey and are saying that they're quite comfortable having the flexible work environment that we have today, and they are less eager to head and run back to the office. So with that, if we can flip to the second slide, and that gives us kind of an overview of the trends that we're seeing emerge across this. And that's, flexibility for sure is something that's with us and is going to stay with us. We knew it before, but we're seeing it in droves now, and 91% of the workforce, except for folks in IT, are seeing and wanting and valuing flexibility in ways they haven't before. We think the IT sector is a bit different because it's already had that flexibility. It also has proven to be a bit more resilient in current economy as e-commerce has ticked up. Additionally, health concerns very much top of mind. And so, the conversation that Dr. Weston was talking about, very much top of mind for all workers, and particularly workers with kids. And as they think about returning to work and what's going to happen to their children if they are not in school, or even when they are returned to school. And then 8 in 10 want work-life balance, and that dovetails into the flexibility. How that shows up is very different by gender, by generation, by socioeconomics, by cultural differences, by where you exist in the world and what work you're doing. But flexibility, work-life balance is here to stay. And then I've already kind of captured about 43% of workers believe that there's an end to the 9 to 5 in the office. And you see a number of employers shifting how they work, where they work, even looking at their footprint, their real estate footprint, and more investing in their technology footprint. So the traditional 9 to 5, 5 days a week in the office is likely to be gone. If you can move to the next slide. And here I've highlighted a little already around gender differences, but get into generational differences. And for me, the big learning personally here was, a lot about Gen Zs. That's our future workforce. They are actually missing and clamoring the need to be back in the office. And I think there are multiple reasons why. So you think about where they may be as it relates to networking and their friends. Do they live alone or do they live with their parents? All of those things are adding to the desire for them to get back and return to the workplace, more to allow for that social connection and that networking that happens there. Gen Xers and boomers were a bit uneven in the mix there. Boomers, are choosing a bit more on the socializing and collaborating and needing that to get back to the office. But then you have Gen Xers who really want to be back in the office around collaboration, but only for collaboration and connection moments. Gender divide, I've already hit on that already, that women and men are feeling slightly different about this. And obviously it's hitting working parents in disproportionate ways that many of us may not imagine if we don't have if we don't have kids, or we have resources that support us, meaning we have someone that comes into the home, someone who's supporting us, or your children are still able to go to school. So one size does not and is not going to fit all. So it is truly a one-to-one size fit. So next slide, please. Haves and have not, and we've seen this happen across economies, across countries, and it's really where the skills are and where skills are in demand. We've seen, those who are impacted more in hospitality, leisure, entertainment, retail. You've seen those impacted a lot more, and you've seen, kind of the divide of essential and non-essential worker. So if you step back and you look at that, this slide should not be that that surprising to anyone, just along those lines. but we know where jobs are growing. We've talked about this differently in the Milwaukee area around IT tech jobs, where you're seeing it around finance, accounting, sales jobs. Those are jobs, those are in-demand skills that are real, and they're showing up not just in Milwaukee, not just in the US, but globally. We see the trends of moving towards that. Cybersecurity isn't obvious since we're doing more work through technology that we're seeing, and companies are using this time period to transform their businesses. And with that, you're seeing sales show up a bit differently, but still is an area of growth that's occurring. And then the next slide. And here I've captured a bit of the in-demand skills, but one of the things that's interesting about this is it's more of the skills that are soft skills that are in demand. So communication, adaptability, but you still have relationship building. And even though we're not connecting the same way we used to connect, relationship building is very important and essential. Analytical, thinking, critical skills remain very important, and that's because it's generated through data and the importance of data. We will see leaders needing to be more resilient, employees needing and wanting their leaders to coach them and to lead with and lead from a place of empathy. So those are kind of the in-demand soft skills. The in-demand hard skills, again, focus on business transformation, wellness, and logistics and e-commerce. Those are the areas where we see growth and we see opportunities occurring. And then the final slide. And here, as we step away and we kind of think about what the next normal will be, and often have to shift people that we will not get back to where we were pre-COVID. The acceleration has gone, and the workers of the future are saying, we want something different. At Manpower Group, we've approached this through a people first lens, and with that, we generally kind of step back and ask ourselves a few questions. Why the return to work? We know that people will go back to the office. It's important to get back to the office, but why you're in the office will change. So for collaboration to connections, if you look at the data, there are certain groups, certain workers who have to be together in order to collaborate. But then there are certain groups and certain workers who want to be together to socialize and to connect. So ask yourself, why return to the office? The skills that are evolving, what's needed, there's a prime opportunity to lean into upskilling and reskilling your workforce. Identify individuals who may not be active in the workforce and how that skill set could help your employers. And then flexibility. I think that is going to become the word that most workers use and leverage. I literally just got off the line with an interview, and the candidate was saying the need for flexibility. Flexibility and balance are really important to most workers. And increasingly, which has been an area that has been a bit off limits, but emotional well-being. We often talk about physical well-being, but emotional well-being is so important, and we're seeing this happen, particularly as we go into the winter months here in Wisconsin and in the Midwest. Having connection to employees, creating a space, leveraging EAP programs, talking about health and well-being is very essential to all employees, regardless of age and regardless of the job. And lastly, but not least, all four of those things build upon resilience and the importance of the individual resilience and the organizational resilience. So those are some of the trends we're seeing, and those are things that we're stepping back as we think about the next new normal.
Michelle, thank you. That was a really helpful setup, and I'm going to bring Tori and Stacy into the conversation so we can kind of dialogue with the three of you. And I kind of listening to your presentation, I'm still stuck by Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella's statement that we've gone from working at home to sleeping at work. And I think the challenge everyone is facing is how to balance those two. So Tori, let me start with you and kind of respond a little bit to what Michelle said. And one of the things I think about with Harley Davidson as you're going through your rewire project is how do you manage kind of the flexibility that people want in an office while you have people that are required to show up every day because of their job on a manufacturing plant floor? And what kind of tensions is that causing?
Yeah, first of all, Michelle, thanks for your research. We leverage that a lot here at Harley and echo everything that you said. Yeah, it's a unique balance that we have to make here. We're a 117-year-old company that was, you weren't working unless you were in your seat, right? And so overnight, we became, a company that was working remote. We have a new CEO. We have a new strategy. There is a lot going on. And so with our workforce, yeah, we have basically declared that our salaried workforce that does not support manufacturing will never go back full time. We will always have a hybrid model. We will look at our space differently. We will reduce our footprint, et cetera, all of the things that Michelle talked about. But of course, like you mentioned, we do have for us, our essential workers, so our manufacturing employees. And so, we spend a lot of time making sure, of course, safety is the #1 priority there. We've had to add positions to support that. We have our lifestyle centers on each facility has a medical clinic where we do all of our, all of the testing. And we really made sure to recognize them in many different ways. But it is the reality of our workforce, right? We have different workers, right? And so we've just declared we will have different, working environments for them.
Yeah, and Stacy, just how do you address this from running a small mid-sized company where lots of people are their own HR departments in addition to running the companies, and now you deal with this very abrupt upheaval? How have you been managing this change in your company?
Well, in our organization, we're a little bit different because we're much smaller and we are a food facility. We already have that cleanliness going on within the organization. So the PPEs and the face masks, the gloves, the lab coats and everything else, those are all standard in our organization. So we haven't seen a really big effect on our organization. We have, on any given day, we have approximately 28 to 32 people in the building at any given time. So we just built a new facility and we're able to social distance quite well. People are wearing their masks as they're instructed to do so. And so that's working out pretty well. As well as our demographics are not as diverse as many of the larger organizations out there. So we're primarily white, female, and very young individuals. In fact, I can think of 2 people in our organization that have small children that if one's actually too small to even be in school, and the other one was out of school for a short period of time. So we've always been a flexible organization and we've tried to accommodate people's schedules. So in the office, if you can work from home, it's usually on a case-by-case basis, but for the most part, we do have the manufacturing facility in the back where people have to be here at all times. And we did take a recent look at people working from home and whether or not it was still truly necessary for them to do that. So we've made some changes here and there. And I'd have to say we've had 2 cases in our organization of COVID. So we've been maintaining quite well in the whole pandemic. So we're not seeing, quite the challenges that these larger organizations are having.
Yeah, Michelle and Tori, and then I'll ask Stacy this question too. How do you hold on to the culture that you've largely built in an organization like Manpower or one as well known as Harley Davidson? You've built this culture by having people kind of connected in an office. And now it seems like almost overnight, we're going to flexibility. People can work remotely. They don't have to be in the office. How do you hold on to that culture in an environment like that?
So I think it's two ways. One is communication. We've quadrupled our communication. Jonas is speaking to groups. I'm speaking to groups. We hold bigger meetings, team meetings. In my own personal team, we meet twice a week, Mondays and Fridays. So it's communication. The second is, as I alluded to, how do you create connection moments? So one of the things that we are thinking about from our downtown office is connection moments. When do you bring people together to connect, to collaborate together? And it can be for social reasons, or it can be simply to deliver work. All that, you have to do it with absolute safety, absolute social distance, mask, and mindful of how to do that indoors versus outdoors. But we've had very few of those at the moment, but we are intentional about creating collaboration and connection moments too.
Tori?
Yeah, I would add, this is, probably been the toughest part for us is, we are actually, with our new strategy, we're actually rolling out a new, what we're calling HD #1 high performing culture. And it's hard to do in a virtual world. Even if you think about talking to all of our manufacturing facilities, you can't put everyone in a room together anymore, right? And so communication, I'm gonna, steal Michelle's answer, but our CEO, Jochen, he talks to the workforce deliberately every single week, whether it's a video or a live meeting or a message. We are changing a lot, and we are more transparent than we ever have, and just really communicating with employees is really important. And then, something we've been through a lot. We restructured earlier this year. We have a new leadership team, and what we've tried to do is just bring some more small talk to our meetings, instead of just everyone logging on and sitting there quietly and to start business. And I know it sounds silly, but it does go a long way, because if you think about it, when you're in the office while you're waiting for everyone, you're talking. And so it's bringing back some more of that personal connection that people, myself included, are just really missing by talking to a computer all day. So I don't have the perfect answer, but communication, absolutely agree.
Yeah. So Stacy, it sounds like you were well prepared for this, but what concerns do you have kind of working in this new environment?
Well, we definitely, I reiterate what Michelle was saying too. There's been some problems with collaboration, and when we originally were allowing, part of our workforce to work from home and the other part to be at work, we really did see a cultural decline in the organization. So it was difficult for people to communicate. They found ways to do that, of course, and we had them set up with remote computers and everything, but the culture, we've been going through our cultural values and establishing them as of late. So it's very timely. And one of them that came up was collaboration. And I think it came up because people were feeling the suffering of not being able to work together with people. And we found ways to just collaborate better by holding larger meetings, larger groups, social distancing in our main office sections the best that we can, and getting people together. And they seem to flourish better when they're working together, as opposed to being dissected into many different groups. So we're kind of leaving it up to them, the best that they can communicate with each another. And again, because we're small, we're not in many different locations, it's a little bit easier for us than these larger organizations.
Well, let me stick with, again, the three of you on this culture question and take it from a little different perspective. And I'll just use my daughter as an example, who's re-entering the workforce with an MBA, going to work for a technology company out on the West Coast, basically spending an entire internship online, getting a job offer, and now going to work for a company that happens to be in San Francisco, having met nobody, having talked to no one individually, and now not even sure if she needs to show up for her job in San Francisco or can work anywhere in the country to do it. And so the question is, a lot of us in a company already can draw on, the relationships that we have, but what are you doing differently to onboard people who literally have not physically met anybody in your organization and are now going to work for it and may not even have to do that in the location in which you work, in which you have your operations?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question that many of us are trying to figure out. For us, we've just had to be more deliberate about doing beyond the manager, assimilating their new employee, but my team does a virtual onboarding where we'll virtually show them what the facilities look like, at least so they can get a sense of what that is. We're taking them through, you know, the strategy work that employees have had the opportunity to be along, you know, that have been here. We're taking them through that. So we're doing that on a much more regular basis than we actually were doing when we were in the office. We would do that new employee orientation monthly or quarterly, and now we have to do it weekly, because I mean that's absolutely something that is people are missing out on, right? Is onboarding into an organization and not actually, you know, seeing anyone, but it's preparing us for, as we move into the future, allowing us to hire in other cities and bring, you know, not always have to reload everyone or every position in one of our major cities. But for us, it's just being more deliberate and doing it on a regular basis.
I would echo what Tori said. I think their only add that I would say is there is a potential benefit here, because as a global company, you know, onboarding new people virtually, you can actually touch more cultures, touch more people. So there is a slight benefit there. The only other add that I would have is I'm onboarding someone on my team, and I intend to send, and a number of managers and leaders have sent personal care packages to their homes. But it is, you know, moved to a virtual tour, virtual orientation, all of those things, as Tori said, are the things that we're doing. And some managers add an additional touch by a care package to their homes.
So Stacy, go ahead. Yeah.
I would echo that as well. We do a lot of virtual tours because we are a food facility and we have a lot of certifications and kosherizations and things like that that have to happen. We're accustomed to doing the virtual tours, or we've grown accustomed to doing them. We also have sales reps that work in 4 different states throughout the country and internationally. And we've had to do Teams meetings. We've grown very fond of Microsoft Teams and WhatsApp, and those have become very commonplace in our organization.
And so I hear and appreciate and respect those answers. I just kind of asked the question again, do you think this is going to make kind of employees newer to your companies more or less tethered to your organizations? Or is it more tenuous when you're doing this all virtually? And maybe this is just an old guy speaking, but I'm trying to figure out kind of how that's going to feel, and how you feel about how well connected those folks will be to your organizations and your culture.
So Tim, I will revert back to Gallup research that said generally employees leave their managers, not necessarily a company. And this is where I think it's very important that a manager is engaging at a high level. Back to my point of managers sending care packages, but managers through technology, to Stacy's point, be it, you know, WhatsApp, be it text, be it whatever it is that they're doing, managers are going to have to be increasingly more engaged, and they can't outsource that to their human resources team. They have to do it.
Yeah, this is a leadership capability that is new for some leaders, and it's critical. And I think that's one of the things that we're really focused on right now, just because of all of the changes, and making sure that our leaders are doing all that. Because yeah, you know, as much as our leaders want to say people are leaving because they don't make enough, that's not why. It's typically because of their manager. And so yeah, there is absolutely a risk there where people don't feel as engaged, but we have to figure out you know, how to make them feel engaged.
Stacy, let me ask you the question, and all 3 of you then, and you started kind of with the demographics of your workforce. And if you read kind of the labor reports and labor studies that are going on right now, women have been hit especially hard in this COVID recession, juggling multiple responsibilities, the working at home, kids in school, other people to take care of. How do you see that affecting your workforce? And then Michelle and Tori, kind of the same thing, because while this is also hitting kind of the lower skilled part of our economy, it's also hitting women differently than it is men.
We do our best to be as flexible as we can with our individuals. So if we have somebody that's coming up with a crisis of some sort and and needs to maybe work a different schedule of hours, we're able to allow them to do that. We also, for years now, we've been working half-day Fridays, which allows people to take children to doctor appointments or their own doctor appointments and things like that. We live in Wisconsin. We want to enjoy the summer weather. So we've always had that motto to work half-day Fridays and be as flexible as we possibly can. In the back with running the equipment and the operations, it's not quite as easy, but we are finding ways to modify the time frames. Again, sometimes we're working 12-hour days. Sometimes we're allowing people to only work the 8-hour days if they're feeling the fatigue. So we've really been quite flexible, and being small, we're able to do that.
Yeah, I could just add, as we work on an outcomes-based culture, we've just been communicating that, I think at first people were like, I have to be online all the time when we first went to remote, and that people should manage their day, right? And we understand that during the day you might need to help your child get logged on, or we encourage people to take a mental break and go walk outside. And so we've actually kind of had our rules of the road, if you will, of just ideas and flexibility. And it's been a struggle because you have leaders who don't have those commitments that are like, so-and-so has missed this meeting. And so we've had to manage that, but it's a journey that we're on. But we've really, really tried to communicate around the flexibility of we don't really care when or how you get your work done, but, more of the outcomes versus, how it happens.
Have any of you hired new employees now with the explicit understanding that they're going to work remotely kind of full time?
Yeah, we have. Mm-hmm. Yep.
We have, Tim. We rolled out in the States kind of work your way, and it depends on the individual. So one size fit one, and it obviously depends on the job. But yes, there are employees whom we've hired that they will end up, working from wherever, based off of their schedule.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've opened up our recruiting externally a bit. There's a lot of tax issues state to state, but we have opened that up a bit. We just hired a chief digital officer who's based out of Boston, right? And so, it's given us an opportunity to look at talent a bit differently. But yeah, it is definitely limited based on the role and more so based on the role.
We've been pretty much in a hiring freeze, so we haven't had really that situation come up yet at this point.
Here's a good question for all three of you. We're hearing two different points of view. People want to work from home and appreciate the flexibility, but the other point of view on preserving culture and collaboration. Which is more likely to win out? Do companies need to start using technology and figuring out creative ways to reach employees who are working from home?
I think both are going to win. Oh, sorry, Michelle.
Go ahead, Tori.
I think both are going to win. I think you're going to have a workforce that is hybrid potentially, and I know that's what we're calling it, where I can work from home, or I based on capacity of how what we have in our new facilities, could go in for a collaboration meeting or a space, or I just need to work with my in my team. I think that's where we're going. I know that's where we're going, and I think you're going to see a lot more flexibility and people being able to choose with both options.
I would agree with Tori. I just think that also culture isn't in a building or in a place, it's in your people, and its behaviors. And so we know that our values are what root us together and keep us together, our values and our company purpose. Those will be the things that keep us connected. And to Tori's point, both will win out. And most of the employers with whom I'm talking, they're looking at a hybrid structure. And that hybrid approach will be based off of their business model, based off of the jobs that they have, based off the regulatory environment they operate in, but then also based off of the individual employee. So it's a bit of both, but I would say also fundamentally is culture is not in a place, it's within us.
So I'm going to press this again. Do you think people are going to feel though more like free agents? You know, I'm working for Manpower, I'm working for Conoils or Harley Davidson, I'm working remotely, I'm in and out. Do I feel more like an employee or a free agent?
I'll take a stab at that. So as much as the gig economy is growing, you've also seen some of the drawbacks with the gig economy as you look at some of the big players in that space. So Uber, one of the things that we know about human beings is we like to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. We like to be connected to something. And so much of this free agent concept, I think will exist. And will it grow post-COVID? Absolutely. But fundamentally, we enjoy operating together in communities together. And so companies, organizations provide that. And the values and the ways of working, the purpose, those are the things that will connect the organization and really continue to propel the work. Yes, of course, some will opt out based off of their schedule, based off of their skills. But the large majority of workers, I believe, will continue to opt into a community of work.
I agree with Michelle. I mean, we do a pulse survey and we have higher results now post this new way of working than we did in the past. And a lot of it also is just, you know, where we're headed and what changes we've made. But because we're communicating more and we're deliberate and there's just more people are rallying around what we're doing. And so I absolutely ditto what Michelle says.
Stacy, are you seeing, and we'll probably make this the last question, Michelle and Tori, question is, are you all seeing things taking longer to get done because of people's asynchronous schedules now, or is that not a concern?
Actually, the opposite for us. I see people utilizing their time very well. I'm very impressed with the amount of work that's getting done when people are working at home. Our sales reps have always worked remotely, and it's actually more of a challenge to get them to shut down at night and stop working than it is to just work an 8-hour day. So that's been really good. We've got a great set of people, and they take their jobs very seriously. So we have not had any problems with that.
Yeah, nor have we. We've been moving faster than I've ever seen us in the many years I've been at Harley, so not an issue at all.
So Tim, comparable, but what I will say is that we're beginning as we think, you know, resiliency is important. We're beginning as we move into winter to see that there's a bit of weariness. And this is where leadership, to Tori's earlier point, becomes very important in how you're engaging individuals. So we saw an uptick because people were working more hours. But now you see a bit of, you know, fatigue and weariness. So how do you continue to keep engagement, keep those levels, keep productivity high? That is, you know, absolutely something that we're focused on and working on, and engaging our employees is, you know, first of mind there.
Well, we just scratched the surface on this, and an hour goes fast. So I want to thank you all very much. Michelle Nettles, Chief People and Cultural Officer for Manpower, Tori Tremont, Chief Human Resource Officer for Harley Davidson, and Stacy Peterson, CEO of Conoils. I want to thank you all for a fascinating discussion, and hope to have you back in the future to test the theories that you're putting out, which sound like they're going to be more than theories. We're operating under them. And Dr. Weston, thank you again for participating and for also answering all the questions that came through our Q&A. Really appreciate that. Again, thank you all. If you haven't, go out and vote today. And we'll see you next November 17th from 11 to 12 with the next edition of this program. So again, thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.